Well, that last bit about how cattle are kind of superheroes with being able to utilize that land and that grass, that gets brought up quite a bit, but I have not had someone bring up kind of the history of how far back the relationship between human and cattle go. So I'm glad you brought that up because that's a new perspective for that question.
Yeah, well, and I mean, to our topic of today being vaccines, I mean, we have the term vaccine from cows. And, the story of Edward Jenner, if anybody would like to Google that and read in further detail, basically the observation that the milkmaids in England, this was back in the late 1700s, that the milkmaids would have cowpox lesions on their hands, but the rest of they weren't decimated by smallpox. And vaccine comes from vacca, which is the Latin, term for cow. So basically that's named the whole industry of what we know about vaccination and vaccinology.
Very interesting. I had heard that story, but I forgot about it. So, tell us a little bit more about what you do today and kind of why you're today's experts on vaccines for this audience.
Well, I'm a little bit older, so I'm in my career maybe towards the tail end, but I spent 23 years with various companies manufacturing vaccines and pharmaceuticals for livestock use and production. So I practiced 5 years before that in central Nebraska, and my wife and I just got moved back here, so that's good. Basically, my entire career has been with livestock production from the beef cattle end. So, from practice to educating. I was on faculty at Kansas State University for about 4 years while I was pursuing a graduate degree. I went to work for industry and actually did a stint in research and development and then technical services for a number of years.
So when you think about whether it's ranchers utilizing vaccine programs or feeders utilizing vaccine programs, what are some of the biggest mistakes or missed opportunities you see people make when they're utilizing vaccines?
Probably the biggest thing is something as simple as, reading the label. Every vaccine comes with a label, commercial product comes with a pretty detailed label and a package insert. And I think I can maybe pick on my own profession a little bit is that we don't take the time to read those. If you've read any given product, you read that vaccine label 2 years ago, they update those continuously. There may be something in there that you need to know. So, I mean, certainly familiarize yourself with what you're going to be using and then use them according to the label. There's been some really interesting shortcuts that people can take or have taken over the years. I don't recommend them, but they say, well, I only want to give one shot, so we mix Bactrim in with a modified live viral product, and that's really a no-no. Because if you can combine those products, the companies will do that, which we certainly have done with things like our viral BR vaccines, along with the manhemia, which we know is the biggest challenge to producing beef when we get to certainly the stocker and the feeding phase of the operations.
Okay, so kind of your first tip is read the label.
Yes.
What about when it comes to mistakes made with maybe mixing those modified lives or just on working days where you're working outside? Can you talk about some of those efficacy tips to make sure that you're not harming that vaccine?
That's a great point. And people think that they'll have the cake in the bottom of a modified live, and then they'll have the liquid that they put in there to dissolve it, if you will, and mix it up. And then people will make a mistake of taking that and agitating it, over agitating it, we'll call it that. They shake it really hard. And if you're shaking that thing hard enough to get bubbles in there, you're probably denaturing some of that and rendering that vaccine unusable to the animal. Because what we're doing with that modified live is we're putting a tamed down bug into our animals, and then that's supposed to replicate and grow within the animal to generate the immunity that we want. And if you've denatured that by shaking it, so just, gentle inversion, and then, maybe even just swirling it around like you would a glass of wine, that's sufficient to get those things mixed appropriately, and they're effective. The other thing with modified lives is you should use as fresh a product as you can, and only mix what you're going to use within the next hour. You don't want to be mixing up 300 doses and then letting them sit in the sun, or go to lunch and then come back and finish working your cattle. But those are just little key points that those are covered well in BQA materials. And I think education is critical, and you're doing that through your forums just like this. So that's very good.
Folks, if you enjoyed this portion of the conversation, be sure to check out the full conversations wherever you find your favorite podcasts, or right here on YouTube by searching for Casual Cattle Conversations.